The stars glittered like diamonds scattered across the endless black canvas of space. It was a sight that had once filled humanity with awe and wonder, but now it only brought fear. The galaxy was no longer a place of exploration and discovery. It had become a battleground. Humanity's expansion into the cosmos had not gone unnoticed by other species, and one group in particular, the Vocari, had made their hostility clear. Towering beings encased in shimmering metallic exoskeletons, they viewed humans as weak, fragile creatures unworthy of claiming even a small corner of the universe. On Frontier 7, a remote mining colony nestled on the edge of a barren moon, the air buzzed with tension. The colony's residents moved quickly, their faces pale with worry as they prepared for what many believed to be inevitable: an attack from the Vocari. Rumors had spread like wildfire after scouts reported sightings of alien forces gathering nearby. The colony's defenses were minimal at best: a handful of outdated turrets, a few armored vehicles, and a squadron of soldiers who were more accustomed to dealing with equipment malfunctions than combat. Among those soldiers was Daniel Carter, a man whose quiet demeanor often led others to underestimate him. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, nor did he possess the charisma of some of his peers. But Daniel carried something far more important within him: determination. From the moment he enlisted, he had struggled to prove himself, knowing all too well how easy it was for people to dismiss him as just another ordinary soldier. Yet here he was, standing shoulder to shoulder with his comrades, ready to defend Frontier 7 against overwhelming odds. Captain Lisa Monroe, the commanding officer of the outpost, stood before her troops in the dimly lit briefing room. Her voice was steady, though there was no mistaking the weight behind her words. "We've received intel confirming a large Vocari force moving toward us," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "They're fast, strong, and technologically superior. If we don't act now, this colony will fall." A murmur rippled through the assembled soldiers. Some exchanged nervous glances while others clenched their fists tightly around their weapons. Daniel remained silent, his gaze fixed firmly on Captain Monroe. She continued, "Our primary objective is to gather intelligence on their movements and capabilities. I need volunteers for a reconnaissance mission deep into enemy territory." For a moment the room fell silent. No one wanted to step forward. It was a suicide mission, plain and simple. Then, without hesitation, Daniel raised his hand. "I'll go," he said, his voice calm but resolute. His decision caught everyone off guard, including himself. But, deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do. This was his chance to make a difference, to show everyone, including himself, that he was capable of greatness. Captain Monroe nodded approvingly. "Good. You'll lead a small team. Choose wisely." With that, she dismissed the soldiers, leaving Daniel to assemble his squad. He didn't have to think long about who to pick. Riley Adams, a sharpshooter known for her uncanny accuracy, was first on his list. Her piercing blue eyes seemed to see everything, and her steady hands never faltered under pressure. Next came Marcus Lee, a tech specialist whose expertise with machinery and electronics was unmatched. Lastly, he selected Ava Torres, a medic whose compassion matched her courage. Together, they formed a tight-knit unit, each member bringing unique skills to the table. As they geared up for the mission, the reality of what lay ahead began to sink in. The Vocari weren't just any enemy. They were relentless, merciless, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. Stories of their conquests had spread throughout human settlements, painting them as unstoppable juggernauts. Many believed that resisting them was futile, that humanity's days among the stars were numbered. But Daniel refused to accept that fate. He clung to the belief that bravery and ingenuity could overcome even the most daunting challenges. The journey to the designated drop zone was tense. The 4 soldiers traveled in silence, their minds consumed by thoughts of what awaited them. The vehicle jolted over rough terrain, its headlights cutting through the darkness of the alien landscape. Outside, jagged rocks and twisted trees loomed like shadows cast by nightmares. Every sound, The rustling of leaves, the distant call of an unknown creature set their nerves on edge. When they finally reached their destination, Daniel gathered his team for a final briefing. "Listen up," he said, his tone firm yet reassuring. "This isn't going to be easy. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and walking straight into the lion's den. But if we succeed, we might just save this colony, and maybe even turn the tide of this war. Stick together, watch each other's backs, and remember why we're here." His words struck a chord with the others. Riley gave a curt nod, her expression unreadable but determined. Marcus adjusted his glasses, muttering something about calibrating his scanner. Ava simply smiled, her presence calming in the face of uncertainty. For the first time since the mission began, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. They weren't just soldiers. They were a team, bound by a shared purpose. With their gear checked and spirits bolstered, they set out into the wilderness. The forest surrounding them was eerily silent, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation. Every step took them closer to danger, yet none of them hesitated. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open areas whenever possible. Daniel led the way, his rifle slung across his chest and his eyes scanning for threats. Hours passed, and the oppressive stillness began to wear on them. Just when they thought they might reach the Vokari stronghold undetected, disaster struck. A twig snapped beneath Marcus's boot, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet night. Everyone froze, hearts pounding as they waited for the worst. Seconds ticked by, agonizingly slow, until a low growl broke the silence. Something, or someone, was watching them. Daniel signaled for the team to take cover behind a cluster of boulders. Peering cautiously around the edge, he spotted movement in the distance. Two figures emerged from the shadows, their metallic forms gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Vokari scouts. Their sleek armor reflected the dim light, making them appear almost otherworldly. One of them tilted its head as if sensing something amiss. "Stay low," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't move." The seconds stretched into minutes as the scouts scanned the area. Tension coiled in the air like a snake ready to strike. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the aliens turned and disappeared back into the darkness. The team exhaled collectively, relief washing over them. But they knew better than to let their guard down. Danger lurked everywhere, and one wrong move could mean the end. Pressing onward, they pushed deeper into enemy territory, their resolve stronger than ever. Each step brought them closer to their goal, and with every challenge they faced, Daniel grew more certain of one thing. Humanity's survival depended not on strength or technology alone, but on the courage to stand up and fight. And fight they would, for Frontier 7, for Earth, and for the future of their species. The forest grew denser as Daniel and his team moved deeper into enemy territory. The towering trees blocked out much of the moonlight, casting long shadows that twisted and danced across the ground. Every step they took was deliberate, their boots crunching softly against the dry leaves and brittle twigs beneath them. They had to be careful. Every sound carried far in the stillness of the alien night. The air felt heavy, thick with tension, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Riley walked a few paces ahead of the group, her rifle slung over her shoulder but ready to fire at a moment's notice. Her sharp eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. She had always been the most observant member of the team, able to spot danger before anyone else even realized it was there. Marcus followed closely behind her, clutching a handheld scanner in one hand and adjusting his glasses with the other. His fingers flew over the device's controls, trying to pick up any signals or traces of Vokari activity nearby. Ava brought up the rear, her medical kit strapped securely to her back. Though she wasn't trained for combat, her calm presence kept the others grounded. Daniel led the way, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. He knew the mission was dangerous, perhaps even suicidal, but he couldn't afford to let fear take hold. Not now. Not when so many lives depended on their success. "Keep moving," he whispered, his voice low enough to avoid carrying too far. "We're almost there." As they continued, the landscape began to change. The dense forest gave way to rocky terrain dotted with jagged boulders and shallow caves. This was where intelligence reports suggested the Vocari might have set up a forward operating base, a staging area for their planned attack on Frontier 7. If the team could confirm its location and gather valuable information, they might just give humanity a fighting chance. But finding the base wouldn't be easy. The Vocari were masters of stealth and deception, blending seamlessly into their surroundings thanks to their advanced technology. Their exoskeletons weren't just armor. They also served as camouflage, making them nearly invisible unless they wanted to be seen. Even worse, they employed drones, small insect-like machines that scouted the area and relayed data back to their commanders. One wrong move and the entire squad could find themselves surrounded. After hours of trekking through the unforgiving terrain, the team finally reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. From their vantage point, they could see faint lights flickering in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm their suspicions. The Vocari were here. Daniel crouched down behind a large rock, motioning for the others to do the same. Riley joined him, peering through the scope of her rifle to get a better look. "What do you see?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "Looks like some kind of camp," Riley replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can make out a few structures, probably temporary shelters, and what might be vehicles parked near the edge of the clearing. There are guards patrolling the perimeter, but I don't see any drones. Yet." Marcus leaned forward, squinting at the distant lights. "If we can get closer, I might be able to hack into their systems and grab some intel. But we'll need to be careful. They'll have sensors monitoring the area." Ava nodded, her expression grim. "And if something goes wrong, we won't have time to regroup. We're already deep behind enemy lines." Daniel considered their options carefully. He knew they couldn't afford to hesitate, not with Frontier 7. Counting on them. But charging headfirst into the camp would be reckless. They needed a plan, something that would allow them to slip in undetected, gather the information they needed, and get out alive. "Here's what we'll do," he said after a moment of thought. "Riley, you stay here and keep watch. If anything, or anyone, comes our way, let us know immediately. Marcus, you're with me. We'll circle around to the east and try to find a weak spot in their defenses. Once we're inside, you focus on accessing their systems while I cover you. Ava, stay close to Riley in case either of you needs backup." The others nodded in agreement, their trust in Daniel evident despite the gravity of the situation. Without another word, Riley settled into position, her rifle aimed steadily at the distant camp. Daniel signaled for Marcus to follow him, and, together they began making their way down the ridge, sticking to the shadows as much as possible. The descent was treacherous, the loose rocks threatening to send them tumbling into the open below. Daniel moved cautiously, testing each foothold before committing his weight to it. Marcus stayed close behind, clutching his scanner tightly as if it were a lifeline. Despite the risks, they managed to reach the base of the ridge without incident. From there, they crept along the edge of the valley, using the uneven terrain to mask their movements. It didn't take long for them to identify a potential entry point. A narrow gap in the Vocari's defensive line, a blind spot between two guard posts, offered a slim chance of slipping past unnoticed. Daniel gestured for Marcus to wait while he scouted ahead, ensuring the path was clear. Heart pounding in his chest, he inched forward, every sense on high alert. When he reached the gap, he paused, listening intently for any signs of trouble. Hearing nothing but the faint hum of machinery in the distance, he signaled for Marcus to join him. Together, they slipped through the opening and into the heart of the enemy camp. The structures Riley had spotted earlier loomed larger now, their metallic surfaces glinting faintly in the dim light. Strange symbols etched into the walls suggested these weren't just temporary shelters. They were part of a larger operation, possibly linked to the Vocari's invasion plans. Daniel's stomach churned at the thought, but he pushed the feeling aside. Now wasn't the time to dwell on what might happen if they failed. Marcus knelt beside one of the structures, pulling out a small device from his pocket. He connected it to a panel on the wall and began typing furiously, his fingers flying over the keys. "Give me a minute," he muttered under his breath. "I'm bypassing their security protocols, but it's going to take some time." Daniel stood guard, his rifle at the ready. His eyes darted back and forth, scanning the area for any sign of movement. So far, so good. The guards seemed oblivious to their presence. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. He forced himself to breathe evenly, reminding himself to stay focused. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Just as Marcus finished uploading the data onto his scanner, a loud clang echoed through the camp. Both men froze, their hearts skipping a beat. Somewhere nearby, metal scraped against metal, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. The Vocari had heard something, and they were coming to investigate. "We need to move." "Now," Daniel hissed, grabbing Marcus by the arm and pulling him to his feet. They retraced their steps as quickly and quietly as possible, heading back toward the gap in the defenses. But it was too late. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a pair of Vocari warriors. The aliens towered over them, their exoskeletons gleaming menacingly in the low light. One of them tilted its head, studying the intruders with cold, calculating eyes. For a split second, no one moved. Then, without warning, the Vocari raised their weapons. Instinct kicked in. Daniel shoved Marcus to the side, shouting, "Run!" as he fired a shot to distract the aliens. The blast hit one of them squarely in the chest, sending it stumbling backward. Its companion roared in anger, charging forward with terrifying speed. Daniel dove out of the way, narrowly avoiding being crushed underfoot. Behind him, Marcus scrambled to his feet, clutching the scanner tightly as he sprinted toward safety. Gunfire erupted around them as more Vocari joined the chase. Bullets whizzed past Daniel's head, striking sparks off the metal walls of the structures. He zigzagged through the chaos, his mind racing. If they could just reach the ridge, Riley would provide covering fire, giving them a chance to escape. But the aliens were gaining ground, their mechanical limbs allowing them to move faster than any human could hope to match. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the camp. Bright flames erupted from somewhere behind them, momentarily blinding the pursuing Vocari. Daniel glanced over his shoulder to see Riley standing atop the ridge, her rifle smoking from the grenade launcher attachment she'd just used. "Go!" she shouted, firing another round to keep the aliens at bay. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel and Marcus bolted toward the ridge, adrenaline fueling their every step. Ava appeared beside Riley, helping to provide cover as the two men climbed up to join them. By the time they reached the top, the Vocari were regrouping, their angry cries echoing through the valley below. For a brief moment, the team allowed themselves to catch their breath. They had made it out alive, but just barely. Marcus clutched the scanner tightly, knowing the data it contained could mean the difference between victory and defeat for humanity. Daniel looked at each of his teammates, pride swelling in his chest. Against all odds, they had succeeded in their mission. But the battle was far from over. The team didn't stop running until they were miles away from the Vocari camp, their lungs burning and legs aching with exhaustion. They finally collapsed in a shallow ravine, hidden from view by jagged rocks and dense underbrush. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was beginning to wear off, leaving them shaky and drained. Daniel leaned against a boulder, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his rifle, still half expecting the Vocari to appear at any moment. Riley was the first to break the silence. "That was too close," she said, her voice tight but steady. She glanced down at her rifle, checking the remaining ammunition before resting it on her lap. Her sharp eyes darted around the ravine, scanning for threats even though they were far from the enemy now. "If we'd been even a second slower—" "We weren't," Daniel interrupted firmly, cutting her off before she could finish the thought. He forced himself to sit up straighter, trying to project confidence despite the lingering fear gnawing at him. "We got out. That's what matters." Marcus sat cross-legged on the ground, cradling the scanner like it was something precious. His glasses were slightly askew, and sweat dripped down his forehead, but his focus never wavered. His fingers danced over the device's controls, reviewing the data they had risked everything to retrieve. "This is good," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Really good. If I can decrypt this, we might have enough intel to cripple their operations, or at least slow them down." Ava knelt beside him, handing him a canteen of water. "Take your time," she said softly. "But don't push yourself too hard. You're no use to us if you collapse." Her tone was gentle but firm, the kind of voice that demanded obedience without sounding harsh. Marcus nodded gratefully, taking a sip of water before returning to his work. For a while, the only sounds were the soft rustle of leaves overhead and the occasional chirp of alien insects in the distance. The quiet gave Daniel a chance to think, though his thoughts weren't exactly comforting. The mission had gone better than he'd dared hope, but the narrow escape weighed heavily on him. They had faced death head-on and barely survived. How long could they keep pushing their luck? "Do you think they'll follow us?" Ava asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Her question hung in the air, unanswered for a moment as everyone considered the possibility. The Vocari weren't known for letting intruders slip away easily, especially when those intruders managed to sabotage part of their operation. Riley frowned, adjusting her position so she could see both ends of the ravine. "They might," she admitted after a pause. "Their pride won't let them ignore something like this. But tracking us through this terrain won't be easy. We've got a head start, and if we keep moving, we can stay ahead of them." Daniel nodded in agreement. "She's right. We need to put as much distance between us and that camp as possible. Once Marcus finishes decrypting the data, we'll figure out our next move. For now, rest while you can, but stay alert." The group settled into an uneasy silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Marcus continued working on the scanner, his brow furrowed in concentration. Riley kept watch, her rifle ready in case anything or anyone approached. Ava rummaged through her medical kit, making sure all their supplies were intact. And Daniel simply stared into the darkness, replaying the events of the past, few hours in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of the Vocari warriors charging toward them, their exoskeletons gleaming menacingly in the dim light. They moved with such speed and precision, like machines programmed for destruction. It was hard not to feel small and insignificant in comparison. Yet somehow, against all odds, they had survived. They had fought back, not just physically, but mentally. They had adapted, improvised, and refused to give up, even when the situation seemed hopeless. That realization filled Daniel with a strange sense of pride. Maybe humanity wasn't as weak as the Vocari believed. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally looked up from the scanner. "Got it," he announced, his voice tinged with excitement. "I've cracked the encryption. This data, it's incredible. There are maps, schematics, communication logs. It's everything we hoped for and more." Daniel leaned closer, his interest piqued. "What does it tell us?" "Well," Marcus began, scrolling through the information on the screen. "It looks like the Vocari aren't just planning an attack on Frontier 7. This base is part of a larger network spread across several colonies. Their goal isn't just conquest, it's extermination. They want to wipe out humanity entirely." A heavy silence fell over the group. The weight of Marcus's words settled on them like a physical force. It wasn't just about defending one colony anymore. It was about survival. If the Vocari succeeded, there would be no second chances, no rebuilding, no future. "But there's something else," Marcus added, his expression darkening. "They're using some kind of experimental weapon, a device capable of destabilizing entire planetary ecosystems. If they deploy it, Frontier 7 won't just fall, it'll be rendered uninhabitable." Riley cursed under her breath, gripping her rifle tighter. "So we're dealing with fanatics," she said bitterly. "Great, just what we needed." "We can't let that happen," Ava said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Whatever it takes, we have to stop them." Daniel nodded, determination hardening his features. "Agreed. This changes things. We can't just deliver this intel and call it a day. We need to act, and fast." As the reality of their situation sank in, the team began formulating a plan. With the decrypted data in hand, they had a clearer picture of the Vocari's strategy, including potential weaknesses in their defenses. One thing stood out: a central command hub located deep within the enemy camp. If they could infiltrate it and plant false intelligence or disable key systems, they might be able to throw the Vocari off balance long enough for reinforcements to arrive. "It's risky," Riley warned, voicing what everyone already knew. "Even if we make it inside, there's no guarantee we'll get out alive." "I know," Daniel replied, meeting her gaze. "But we don't have a choice. If we don't try, Frontier 7 is doomed. And if Frontier 7 falls, Earth won't be far behind." No one argued. They all understood the stakes. Despite the danger, they agreed to press forward, knowing that failure wasn't an option. As they packed up their gear and prepared to move again, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Fear still lingered in the corners of his mind, but it no longer controlled him. He had seen what they were capable of, both individually and as a team. Together, they had faced impossible odds and come out alive. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The journey back toward the Vocari camp was grim and exhausting. The forest seemed darker now, the shadows stretching longer as night deepened. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, set their nerves on edge. But they pushed on, driven by a shared resolve to protect the people counting on them. When they finally reached the outskirts of the camp, they paused to regroup. From their vantage point, they could see increased activity below. The explosion Riley had triggered earlier had clearly rattled the Vocari, and they were now fortifying their defenses. Patrols moved in tight formations, and drones buzzed overhead, scanning the area for intruders. "This is going to be harder than last time," Riley observed, her voice low. "They're expecting trouble." "Which means we'll have to be smarter," Daniel responded. "We can't afford mistakes." Using the map provided by the decrypted data, Marcus identified a secondary entrance to the command hub, a maintenance tunnel designed for repairs rather than combat. It was heavily guarded but less conspicuous than the main access points. If they timed their approach carefully, they might be able to slip inside unnoticed. "Let's do this," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Stick to the plan. Watch each other's backs." One by one, they crept forward, melting into the shadows like ghosts. The Vocari may have been stronger and faster, but they lacked one crucial advantage: the human spirit. A spirit that refused to yield no matter how dire the circumstances, and so, with hearts pounding and weapons at the ready, they stepped into the lion's den once more. The maintenance tunnel was dark and narrow, its walls lined with exposed wires and pipes that hummed faintly with energy. The air inside was thick and stale, carrying the metallic tang of machinery mixed with something unidentifiable, perhaps coolant or some alien substance used by the Vocari. Daniel led the way, his rifle slung across his chest as he moved cautiously, step by step. Behind him, Marcus followed closely, clutching a small handheld device that emitted a soft blue glow, illuminating their path just enough to see without drawing attention. Riley and Ava brought up the rear, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Every sound seemed amplified in the confined space: the drip of condensation from the ceiling, the occasional creak of metal shifting under unseen pressure. It was unnerving, but they couldn't afford to let their nerves get the better of them. They had come too far to turn back now. The plan was simple: navigate the tunnel, reach the central command hub, plant false intelligence, and disable critical systems if possible. Then escape before the Vocari realized what had happened. Simple, but far from easy. As they ventured deeper, the tunnel began to widen, branching off into smaller corridors. Marcus consulted the map on his scanner, his fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted the settings. "We're close," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the machinery around them. "The main access point should be just ahead." Daniel nodded, signaling for the others to stay alert. He gestured for Riley to take point temporarily, knowing her sharp eyes would spot potential threats faster than anyone else's. She moved forward silently, her rifle raised and ready. The group rounded a corner and came face to face with a pair of Vocari drones hovering near an open doorway. Their insect-like bodies glinted in the dim light, their sensors whirring softly as they scanned the area. "Freeze," Daniel mouthed, holding up a hand to stop the team. He crouched low, motioning for Riley to find cover behind a nearby pipe. Marcus and Ava pressed themselves against the wall, trying to make themselves as small as possible. For a moment, no one moved. The drones floated lazily, their movements jerky yet deliberate. Then one of them turned slightly, its glowing red eye sweeping across the corridor. Riley didn't hesitate. With precise aim, she fired a single shot, striking the first drone directly in its sensor array. It sparked violently, falling to the ground with a clatter. The second drone reacted instantly, spinning toward the source of the disturbance. Before it could retaliate, Daniel fired 2 quick bursts, disabling it mid-flight. Sparks rained down, as the remains of the drones sputtered and died. "Good work," Daniel said quietly, though his praise was cut short by the realization that the noise might have alerted nearby Vocari. "Let's move. Quickly." They hurried through the doorway, finding themselves in a larger chamber filled with blinking control panels and towering servers. This was the heart of the command hub, the nerve center of the Vocari operation. Thick cables snaked across the floor, connecting various pieces of equipment to a massive central console. The room buzzed with activity, though it was eerily devoid of living beings, at least for now. "This is it," Marcus said, his voice tinged with both excitement and urgency. "I can upload the false intel here, but it'll take time. And I'll need to disable their primary communications relay while I'm at it." "How long?" Daniel asked, keeping his rifle trained on the entrances. 10 minutes, maybe 15, Marcus replied, already setting to work. His fingers flew over the keyboard of his device, interfacing it with the Vocari system. Lines of alien code scrolled across the screen, incomprehensible to anyone but him. "Just keep them off me." "You heard him," Daniel said, addressing Riley and Ava. "Stay sharp. If anything comes through those doors, we deal with it fast." The next several minutes were tense and nerve-wracking. Riley positioned herself near one entrance, her rifle aimed steadily at the opening. Ava stood beside her, clutching a small EMP grenade Marcus had given her earlier. Though she wasn't trained for combat, she knew how to use it, and she wouldn't hesitate if the situation called for it. Daniel took up position near the other entrance, his eyes darting between the shadows beyond the doorway and the glowing screens behind him. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every second felt like an hour as they waited for Marcus to finish his task. The hum of the machinery grew louder, almost deafening, making it difficult to hear anything else. Daniel strained his ears, listening for footsteps or the telltale whir of approaching drones. So far, the coast was clear, but he knew it wouldn't last. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, slightly sending a jolt of panic through the team. "What was that?" Ava whispered, her grip tightening on the EMP grenade. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his voice tight with tension. "But it doesn't sound good." Before anyone could react further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the room in an ominous crimson glow. The Vocari had detected their presence, or worse, Marcus's interference with the system. Either way, they were out of time. "They know we're here," Riley shouted, firing a shot at a group of Vocari warriors who appeared in the doorway. Her bullet struck one of them squarely in the chest, sending it stumbling backward, but more poured in behind it. "Keep going," Daniel yelled at Marcus, who was frantically typing commands into his device. "We'll hold them off." Riley and Ava worked together seamlessly, covering each other as they picked off the advancing Vocari. Riley's precision shots kept the enemy at bay, while Ava threw the EMP grenade into the fray. A burst of electromagnetic energy surged outward, temporarily disabling several of the aliens' weapons and exoskeletons. It gave them a brief reprieve, but the Vocari recovered quickly, their mechanical enhancements proving resilient. Daniel fought alongside them, firing rapidly to create a wall of suppression fire. His heart pounded in his chest, every shot feeling like it might be his last. Yet he refused to falter. These people, his team, were counting on him. Failure wasn't an option. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus let out a triumphant shout. "Done! The fake intel is uploaded and I've disabled their comms relay. Let's go." "Fall back," Daniel ordered, grabbing Marcus by the arm and pulling him toward the exit. The others followed close behind, retreating into the maintenance tunnel as the Vocari closed in. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, narrowly missing them as they fled. The tunnel seemed longer now, darker and more suffocating than before. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they pushed themselves to run faster, knowing the enemy was hot, on their heels. Just when it seemed like they might not make it, Riley spotted a side passage marked on Marcus's map, a shortcut that led directly outside. "This way," she called, veering sharply to the left. The others followed without question, trusting her instincts. The passage was steep and uneven, forcing them to climb and scramble over loose rocks. But it worked. Within moments, they emerged into the cool night air, the oppressive weight of the underground tunnels lifting slightly. They didn't stop there. Knowing the Vocari would pursue them relentlessly, they sprinted toward a ridge overlooking the valley where they had hidden earlier. Riley paused briefly to fire a few rounds into the darkness, buying them precious seconds. When they finally reached the top of the ridge, they collapsed in exhaustion, their bodies trembling with fatigue. For a long moment, no one spoke. They simply lay there, staring up at the stars above, catching their breath. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was fading, leaving only the raw reality of what they had accomplished and survived. "We did it," Marcus said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, but there was no mistaking the pride in his tone. "The Vocari won't know what hit them." Daniel nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, we did. But this isn't over yet. Not by a long shot." He glanced back at the distant camp, where the red glow of the alarm still pulsed faintly in the night. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because that's what humans did. They adapted. They endured, and most importantly, they never gave up. The ridge offered a temporary sanctuary, but the team knew they couldn't linger for long. The Vocari would be hunting them relentlessly, and staying in one place for too long was a recipe for disaster. Daniel scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes picking out landmarks in the dim moonlight. He pointed toward a cluster of jagged rocks about a mile away. "We'll head there," he said, his voice low but firm. "It's close enough to stay hidden, but far enough to give us some breathing room." Riley nodded, already checking her rifle for ammunition. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her focus remained unwavering. "If we can make it there without running into another patrol, we might actually stand a chance of getting back to Frontier 7 alive." Ava sat nearby, tending to a shallow cut on Marcus's arm. Though the wound wasn't serious, she cleaned it carefully, knowing that even minor injuries could become life-threatening if left untreated. "How are you holding up?" she asked him, her tone soft but concerned. "I've been better," Marcus admitted with a wry smile, wincing slightly as Ava applied antiseptic. "But I'm still standing. That's what counts." Daniel allowed himself a brief moment of relief as he watched his team interact. They were battered and exhausted, but they hadn't broken. Each of them had played a crucial role in their mission, and together, they had pulled off something extraordinary. Still, he knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. Not yet. Not when they were still deep behind enemy lines. "Let's move," he said, standing and adjusting the strap of his rifle. "We've got a long way to go, and every second counts." The journey to the rocks was tense and exhausting. The terrain was uneven, filled with loose gravel and hidden crevices that threatened to twist an ankle or send someone tumbling downhill. Riley led the way this time, her sharp eyes scanning for potential ambush points. Behind her, Marcus followed closely, clutching his scanner tightly. Ava stayed near Daniel, her medical kit slung over her shoulder, ready to act if anyone needed help. As they moved, the distant hum of Vocari drones grew louder, a constant reminder that they were being hunted. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the crunch of gravel beneath their boots, set their nerves on edge. They stuck to the shadows as much as possible, avoiding open areas where they might be spotted. At one point, Riley signaled for the group to freeze, pointing toward a faint blue glow in the distance. It was another drone, its sensors sweeping methodically across the landscape. "We can't go around it," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. "It'll see us." Riley frowned, considering their options. Then, without a word, she unslung her rifle and took aim. The shot rang out sharply, echoing through the night, and the drone plummeted to the ground in a shower of sparks. "Problem solved," she muttered, though her expression betrayed her unease. The gunshot would have alerted any nearby patrols, giving them even less time to reach safety. "Keep moving," Daniel urged, his voice urgent. Fast, they pressed forward, their pace quickening as adrenaline surged through their veins. The jagged rocks loomed closer, offering a glimmer of hope. When they finally reached them, Daniel gestured for everyone to take cover. The formation provided natural camouflage, its craggy surface blending seamlessly with the surrounding terrain. From their new vantage point, they could see flashes of movement in the distance. Vocari warriors combing the area, searching for intruders. "They're spreading out," Riley observed, peering through the scope of her rifle. "Looks like they're trying to flush us out, and they'll keep looking until they find us or give up," Daniel replied, rubbing his temples. "We need to figure out a way to throw them off our trail." Marcus glanced at his scanner, scrolling through the data they had retrieved earlier. "There's a supply depot about 5 miles east of here," he said thoughtfully. "It's heavily guarded, but if we can sabotage it, we might draw their attention away from us." "Sabotage it how?" Ava asked, raising an eyebrow. "We don't exactly have explosives lying around." "We don't need them," Marcus explained, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. "The depot stores fuel cells for their vehicles and equipment. If we overload one of the cells, it'll cause a chain reaction. Boom." Daniel considered the idea, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. It was risky, dangerously, but it might just buy them the time they needed to escape. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do it. But we'll have to move fast and stay quiet. One wrong step, and we're done." The team regrouped, their resolve strengthened by the plan. They set out once again, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open areas. The supply depot came into view after nearly an hour of careful navigation, a sprawling compound surrounded by high walls and patrolled by Vocari guards. Bright floodlights illuminated the area, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. "This is going to be tricky," Riley murmured, studying the layout of the compound. "Too many guards, not enough cover." "We'll split up," Daniel decided, his mind racing. "Riley, you and Ava circle around to the west side. Create a distraction, something loud enough to draw their attention but not so big that it gives us away. Marcus and I will slip in from the east and plant the overload device." "What kind of distraction?" Ava asked, her brow furrowing. "Use your imagination," Daniel replied with a faint smile. "Just make sure it works." Riley nodded, already formulating a plan. She and Ava slipped away silently, leaving Daniel and Marcus to approach the compound from the opposite direction. The eastern side was quieter, with fewer guards patrolling the perimeter. Using the cover of darkness, they crept closer, staying low to avoid detection. When they reached the wall, Marcus pulled out a small device from his pocket, a portable hacking tool designed to bypass security systems. He connected it to a panel near the gate, his fingers flying over the controls as he worked to disable the lock. After a few tense moments, the gate clicked open, allowing them to slip inside unnoticed. The interior of the compound was a maze of crates and machinery, each piece vital to the Vocari war effort. Fuel cells lined one side of the area, stacked neatly in rows and glowing faintly with stored energy. Marcus knelt beside one of the cells, attaching a small device to its surface. "This will trigger an overload," he explained quietly. "Once it starts, we'll have about 30 seconds to get clear." 30 seconds, Daniel repeated, his voice tight. "Got it. Let's finish this." Just as Marcus activated the device, a loud explosion echoed from the western side of the compound. Flames erupted into the night sky, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The distraction had worked perfectly. Volcari guards rushed toward the commotion, leaving the eastern side momentarily unguarded. "Go," Daniel hissed, grabbing Marcus by the arm and pulling him toward the exit. They sprinted across the compound, weaving between crates and dodging debris as alarms blared overhead. The first signs of the overload began to appear, flickering lights, crackling energy, and a low, ominous hum that grew louder with each passing second. Behind them, the fuel cells erupted in a massive explosion, sending a shockwave rippling through the compound. Fire and smoke billowed into the air, illuminating the night like a second sun. Daniel and Marcus dove behind a stack of crates just as the blast wave hit, shielding themselves from the worst of the destruction. When the chaos subsided, they emerged cautiously, their ears ringing from the deafening noise. The compound was in ruins, its defenders either dead or fleeing in disarray. Satisfied with their handiwork, Daniel signaled for Marcus to follow him back toward the rendezvous point. Meanwhile, Riley and Ava were already waiting, their faces smudged with soot but otherwise unharmed. "Nice fireworks," Riley remarked dryly, jerking her thumb toward the burning depot in the distance. "You two did good," Daniel said, his voice tinged with pride. "Now let's get out of here before reinforcements show up." The team regrouped and pressed onward, putting as much distance between themselves and the destroyed depot as possible. The explosion had done its job. The Volcari were scrambling. To respond, their focus temporarily diverted from the human intruders. For the first time in hours, the team allowed themselves a small measure of relief. As they trudged through the alien wilderness, the weight of their exhaustion began to catch up with them. Their bodies ached, their clothes were torn and filthy, and their supplies were running dangerously low. Yet despite everything they had endured, there was a sense of accomplishment among them. They had struck a blow against the Volcari, proving that humanity wasn't as weak or helpless as their enemies believed. "There's still a long way to go," Daniel said eventually, breaking the silence. His voice was weary but resolute. "But we've shown them what we're capable of. And we're not done yet." The others nodded, their expressions reflecting a mix of determination and hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them, together. Because that's what humans did. They fought, they adapted, and they refused to give up. Even in the darkest moments, they found a way to shine.